What is going on, everyone? Not long ago I did these LED taillights on my 2003 Chevy Silverado, and at the time I didn't know that this was a problem, but once I put them in, I lost my cruise control. I thought maybe my cruise just actually had a problem, and then I was like, you know, it's kind of goofy that it just quits right as I put these taillights in. So I started doing some research, and lo and behold, come find out when you put LEDs in a cat eye Silverado or maybe even Sierra, you lose your cruise control. So since I already spent the money on the lights and I like how they look, I'm not gonna go back to my old crappy factory ones. We're just gonna have to wire in some resistors. I don't like having to do that. I'm not crazy about that idea. Kind of takes away from the benefit of LEDs to begin with, but here we are and we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna show you how to do that today. As you can see here, doesn't matter what I do, there's no cruise control light that's coming on. It's completely disabled, and there's no fault codes or anything either, so that's why I was kind of stumped. And in addition to there being no sort of codes or anything and the cruise just not working, we don't have any hyper flashing issues or anything like that with the turn signals. So that's another thing that kind of threw me for a loop and made me confused, because I figured, you know, if it was bad enough to make the cruise control not work, I thought that the blinkers would hyper flash, but apparently that is not the case. All right, so I've got the tailgate down. I'm gonna remove both of the tail lights, just 2 Phillips head screws here. In my case, I have seen Torx heads and all sorts of different fasteners, so it may vary depending on your vehicle, but just gonna remove the 2 screws. And before you fully pull them out, make sure you put one hand on the tail light to support it so it doesn't fall and hit anything. All right, so for the sake of everyone's gonna be doing it slightly different and saving time on the video here, I went ahead, and these are the resistors I'm using. They're 50 watt, 6 ohm. I got 1 on each tail light. I just took a piece of thin gauge steel. As you can see here, it was a flat piece of thin steel, drilled a couple holes into it, and then carefully drilled through the side of the taillight here, and no screws are visible through the taillight there, so I did a good job there. And I had to bend the bracket inward a little bit, as you see, because in order to clear, you can see the resistor gets kind of close to hitting right here, and we don't want that. I don't want it rattling around and rubbing on the paint or nothing, so this gives it enough clearance there, and it still gives you enough room to where you can twist and remove both of these bulbs. Even if you had to take it off, just 2 Phillips screws. But this is just a general idea for you guys. I highly recommend placing your resistors as similarly to me as possible, though, just because, like I said, with that little cross brace right there and the angle and geometry of everything, that's really the place that it fits the best. Otherwise, you may have issues. So no matter how you mount it, make sure you test fit it first and make sure it's not getting jammed up against anything. But this should help dissipate the heat. The reason we're doing this, even though there's cooling fins on the aluminum housing around the ceramic resistors, they get super hot, definitely way hotter than you would ever want to touch. They can melt plastic and wires, so that's why we want to have it, you know, it's okay that it's kind of near other components, we just don't want it directly touching it. That's how I mounted it. I will post these down in the video description if you want to buy them online. They were like $6 from Amazon for the set, so not too bad. But what we're going to do is take one end of it where the wire is here, and we need to tap into the power wire for the brake light, and then the other one is going to tap into the ground wire for the brake light. We're going to do that on both tail lights. All right, so I've done a little bit of testing here, and what we're going for on mine, this is the top, depending on your tail lights, but the top one for me, the one that is marked stop position, you'll have a black wire and a blue wire. Now on these other connectors, there's another black and a blue down here, and then this one has black going to it but no blue, it's a green. So this is reverse, I can obviously tell you that. This is just the running light, so it was between this socket and this socket. Both of them have a black and a blue wire running to it, so I went to the stop position one, because of course it's the brake circuit we're dealing with, the stop circuit. So I snipped the blue and the black wire on this socket for the brake circuit, and I used my test light here, checked for power, and when I hit the brake pedal, I do get power there. So I know that the blue and the black for this socket are the ones I need to tap into. So what I've done is I've cut the black wire, and then I put a butt connector on a heat shrink butt connector, by the way. Do not use these cheap Scotch locks that they give you. your wires are going to corrode or rust and break in half within a couple weeks probably, especially if you live in a state with salt. And half the time they do a really bad job of penetrating the coating on the wire and doesn't get a good connection. So I recommend actually soldering it, but I suck at soldering and I don't have the materials to do that with me. So this is the next best thing in my book. What you do is just find your proper gauge butt connector. In my case, I've got one of these step down 16 to 14 gauge butt connectors, heat shrink. You see it's got a red stripe and a blue stripe. The red stripe is a smaller diameter, as I can show you here. There's the hole on the red side. Flip it around, blue side has a bigger hole. So we got one wire going into the red end of it, and the blue end, I've got the other part of the black wire. So remember, we just cut the black wire, we put one end into the butt connector, other end of the black goes into the butt connector, as well as one of the wires coming out of the resistor. Doesn't matter which one, just pick one. So you gotta jam 2 wires into this end, 1 wire there. Now we're gonna repeat the same steps with the blue wire. I'm gonna put another step down connector on there, crimp it to just this one, and on the other end, I'm gonna twist this together with the other resistor wire, jam it together, crimp it, and heat shrink it. There we go, wire coming out of the resistor, twisted together with the blue one, put the blue stripe end on there and just kind of work it all the way on there. There we go, got it slid on there, and I'm gonna go ahead and use my wire crimper stripper combo here. The one here with the bigger tooth, that's for non-insulated butt connectors. These are insulated, so we wanna go ahead in the more curved portion there because we don't want to kink our shrink tubing, otherwise that kind of cancels out the benefit of using a heat shrink butt connector. But we're just gonna nice and tight. I always give my butt connectors the tug test, make sure it's a good connection, and once we have that end crimped, we can do the other wire. You can kind of see the copper through the shrink tubing right here, just a little bit of it, and then once I push it in there farther, you can see no copper anymore, just blue insulation. So I make sure all the copper is in there, and you want to make sure where you're crimping is going to crimp the wire and not just the insulation. All right, once again, give it the tug test on that end, and if it all checks out, then we're gonna go ahead. You're not supposed to use an open flame with these. I don't have a heat gun, so I'm just gonna go ahead and use an open flame. Just kind of keep the flame moving. Don't hover too long, don't get too close, because if you overcook this thing, again, you basically just did it all for nothing. You're gonna have to redo it. You can kind of see it starting to shrink with the heat. What this does is keep moisture and salt, road salt, out of the electrical connection to keep it from corroding. See how it kind of quickly, as soon as you see it kind of shrink a little bit, you pull the flame away from it. You don't want to overheat it. It will burn it up if it gets too hot. All right, there we go. That is good enough for me. All wired up. Now I'm gonna pop these sockets back in, pop the light back in, make sure all my lights still work. And then if everything is still good here, I'm gonna repeat the same steps on the driver's side, and then we're gonna go ahead and take it for a test drive, see if the cruise works now. See, some other punk was in here and used one of those stupid Scotch locks, and then they had a wire coming out of there grounded right into the body where it's now rusting. Don't do that. Don't do that. And when you're reinstalling the taillights, make sure that this plastic tab right here and then the one below it right there, they go into these 2 holes in the body that correspond with those. And make sure none of your wires are getting pinched on any of the sides or anything. Make sure everything's tucked in there nicely. Secure it with zip ties or something if you have to. But as you can see here, we've got no clearance issues. We're gonna go put those 2 screws back in and snug them up. All right, take it for a rip and see what happens. So before I even took off, I turned the ignition on, started the truck, tried hitting the cruise control. It didn't do anything. Tried it at low speed, wasn't doing anything. Must just be that it only engages once you're above like 30 miles an hour. But as you can see, well, I think that is gonna wrap it up for this video. I'm really glad to finally have my cruise control back. I use that religiously when it works. If this video helped you out, make sure you hit that like button, comment down below with any questions, subscribe for more free how-to videos just like this, and check out my other content on the channel here. Also, check me out on all my socials. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.